I took the job because my uncle died doing it, and because the tribal council said the posting couldn't stay empty another week. $2,200 a month plus housing to patrol 60 square miles of reservation land that nobody else wanted to look at anymore. The check cleared 2 days before I drove out, which meant the student loans got another minimum payment and my sister could stay at ASU through spring semester. The substation sat 40 minutes south of Shiprock, past the last place cell service pretended to work. Just a double wide with reinforced door frames, a holding cell that had never held anyone, and a radio tower the wind had bent 15 degrees off true vertical. The previous officer, my Uncle Tom, had lived there 11 months before they found his truck at mile marker 73 with the engine running and both doors open. They never found him. Senior Officer Begay met me at the cattle guard with a ring of keys numbered 1 through 14 and a laminated sheet that caught the afternoon light like mica. He was 60, maybe older, with the kind of hands that had reset fence posts in January. "You've done patrol before," he said. Not a question. "Window Rock, 2 years. Domestic calls mostly, some drunk and disorderlies." He nodded once. "This is different. Your uncle didn't follow the checklist. You will." He handed me the laminated sheet. 12 items typed in a sans serif font that looked like it came from a dot matrix printer in 1992. The plastic was cloudy at the edges where someone had gripped it too many times. "Read it tonight before you do anything else," Begay said. "Then read it again in the morning. Don't improvise. Don't make exceptions. People who improvise out here don't finish their contracts." What happened to my uncle? He stopped following the list around month 10. Begay turned back to his truck, then paused. "The radio is channel 6 only. If anyone uses channel 9, don't respond. If the dispatcher uses your first name, confirm the date before you answer any questions. If she can't confirm, end the transmission." Why would... "Read the list," he said, and drove north until the dust erased him. The substation smelled like creosote and old coffee. Someone had left a space heater running in the back room, which made no sense in August. I turned it off. The main room had a desk, a filing cabinet with no files, a cot with a sleeping bag still in its wrapper, and a window that faced west toward the Carrizo Mountains. The glass had been painted over with what looked like white primer, then scraped clean in a rectangle exactly 12 inches wide and 6 inches tall, right at eye level if you sat in the desk chair. I found the checklist again on the corkboard, pinned next to a duty roster from March. The same 12 items. I sat down and read them in the last hour of daylight. Shiprock Substation Standing Orders 1. Arrive at the substation no earlier than 1700 hours and no later than 1800 hours. Lock the door behind you immediately. Confirm the lock 3 times. 2. Inventory the following before 2000 hours. 12 keys on the ring. 48 hours of battery reserve for the radio. 6 road flares in the trunk. Salt canister above the sink at least 3/4 full. 17 fence posts visible from the west window between the 3rd and 19th position when counting left to right. 3. Between 2000 hours and 2100 hours, verify all 4 door seals with your hand. They will feel warm. This is correct. If any seal feels cold, apply salt to the threshold and do not open that door until dawn. 4. The radio check occurs at 2200 hours on Channel 6. Dispatcher will say, Substation 7 status. You will reply, Substation 7 green. If dispatcher asks anything else before you report status, end transmission and do not respond for 30 minutes. Then retry the check. 5. Monitor the west window between 2300 hours and 2315 hours. If you see movement at the fence line, count the posts again. If the count is incorrect, draw the blackout curtain and do not look outside until 0100 hours. 6. Do not respond to knocking at any door between 2300 hours and 0500 hours. Do not respond to your name. Do not respond to requests for help even if you recognize the voice. 7. If vehicle headlights approach from the southwest between midnight and 0300 hours, turn off all interior lights and sit in the holding cell until the engine noise stops. Count to 300 before emerging. 8. At 0200 hours and 0400 hours, walk the interior perimeter. Count your steps. The route is 49 steps. If the count is different, repeat the walk until it is correct. Then sit at the desk for 10 minutes before resuming normal duties. 9. If you hear footsteps outside the substation that circle the structure, do not look outside. Do not attempt to identify the source. Let them complete the circle. They will not cross the threshold if the seals are intact. 10. At 0500 hours, inspect the area within 20 yards of the substation. Look for disturbed soil, objects that were not present at dusk, or fence posts that have changed position. Photograph anything irregular and file the image with morning report. Do not touch or move anything. 11. Morning report is due at 0600 hours on Channel 6. Report inventory status, seal status, and any photographs from the 0500 inspection. Do not include personal observations or interpretations. 12. Depart the substation no earlier than 0630 and no later than 0700 hours. Lock the door behind you. Confirm the lock 3 times. If you must return before 1700 hours, radio Senior Officer Begay on Channel 6 and wait for clearance. I read it 4 times. Then I checked my watch, 1843, and started the inventory. 12 keys correct. I counted them twice. The radio base station sat on the desk with a battery indicator showing green. 48 hours minimum, it said. I'd have to trust that. The trunk of the patrol vehicle held 6 road flares, all dated from 2 years ago but still sealed. The salt canister was newer, white plastic with a pour spout sitting on the shelf above the rust-stained sink. I shook it. Felt 3/4 full, maybe more. The fence posts were harder. I sat in the desk chair and looked through the scraped rectangle of clear glass. The land outside dropped into a shallow arroyo, then rose again toward a fence line about 60 yards out. The posts were old railroad ties sunk 3 feet deep, the kind that last 50 years if the wind doesn't shove them over. I counted left to right, 17 posts, exactly. I made coffee on the hot plate and ate a granola bar from my bag while the sky went purple. At 1956, I walked to the front door and pressed my palm against the seal where the frame met the jamb. Warm. Not hot, just blood warm, like the metal had been sitting in sun all day even though the door faced north. I checked the back door. Same. The side door by the holding cell. Same. The fourth door, which opened into a storage closet I hadn't noticed before, felt the same. 4 doors, 4 warm seals. At 2200 hours, the radio crackled. Substation 7 status. I picked up the handset. Substation 7 green. Acknowledged. Channel 6 only. Good night, Officer Chi. The dispatcher's voice was older, steady, no inflection. She'd used my last name. I checked the date on my watch anyway. August 14th, the date I was supposed to be here. Good night, dispatch. The radio went silent. I sat at the desk and watched the west window. At 2300 hours, I started counting fence posts again without meaning to. 17. I counted a second time to be sure. Still 17. The light was poor, just a quarter moon and the faint glow from the desk lamp behind me. But the posts were dark enough against the pale soil that I could track them. At 2314, I thought I saw something move near the 9th post. I leaned forward. The movement stopped. I kept watching. Nothing. At 2316, I pulled the blackout curtain, which was just a canvas tarp hung on hooks, and let it fall across the window. I didn't look outside again until 0100 hours. When I finally pulled the curtain back, the fence line looked the same. 17 posts. No movement. I made another cup of coffee and read through an incident log my uncle had left in the desk drawer. Neat handwriting, entries every night for 10 months, then nothing. The last entry was dated June 9th. Inventory complete, seals intact, no activity. 3 coyotes at fence line 2340, but count remained correct. I closed the log and set it aside. At 0200 hours, I walked the perimeter. Started at the front door, moved clockwise. 49 steps. I counted twice to be sure. The walls felt solid under my hand. No cold spots, no drafts. I sat at the desk for 10 minutes, then checked my watch. 0212. I went back to the coffee. At 0400 hours, I did the walk again. 49 steps, correct. At 0500 hours, I unlocked the front door, confirmed it 3 times before I turned the knob and stepped outside. The air was cool, dry, already tasting like the sun that would rise in an hour. I walked a slow circle around the substation 20 yards out, looking at the ground. The soil was caliche and sand, pale enough to show disturbance. Nothing. No tracks except my own from when I'd arrived. No objects. The fence posts in every direction stood where they'd been standing. At 0600, I called in the morning report. Same dispatcher. Substation 7, morning report. Go ahead, Substation 7. Inventory complete, no discrepancies. Seals intact, no photographs. Acknowledged. Good morning, Officer Chi. Good morning, dispatch. I locked the door at 0645, confirmed it 3 times, and drove north toward Shiprock. I bought breakfast at a convenience store and sat in the truck eating a breakfast burrito that tasted like foil and salt while I called my sister. You make it okay? She asked. Yeah, it's quiet. Uncle Tom said that too. I didn't know what to say to that, so I asked her about her classes until she had to go. Then I drove back to the house I was renting in town, a 1-bedroom with gaps in the weather stripping and a shower that only worked if you held the handle at a 45-degree angle, and slept until 1400 hours. I got back to the substation at 1748 on August 15th. Same routine. Locked the door, confirmed 3 times, inventory seals, radio check at 2200. The dispatcher used my last name. I counted the fence posts at 2317. No movement. I pulled the curtain at 2315. At midnight, I was reading my uncle's log again when I heard the engine. It came from the southwest, low and rough, like a truck with a bad exhaust. I turned off the desk lamp and the overhead light and walked to the holding cell. The cell was just a 6x8 concrete box with a bench and a steel door that locked from the outside. I stepped in and pulled the door most of the way closed, leaving a 2-inch gap so I could hear. The engine got louder. I started counting. The sound peaked somewhere close, maybe 50 yards, then faded. I kept counting. At 300, I stopped and listened. Nothing. I waited another 60 count, then stepped out of the cell and turned the lights back on. The substation looked exactly the same. I checked the window. The curtain was still drawn. I didn't pull it back. At 0200, I did the perimeter walk. 49 steps. At 0400, same. At 0500, I went outside and checked the ground. Fresh tire tracks ran from the southwest to the northeast, passing within 40 yards of the substation. They were wide, deep, the tread pattern squared off like a heavy-duty truck. I photographed them with the camera from the filing cabinet, a digital Nikon that was 7 years old but still worked, and filed the image with my morning report. Substation 7, morning report. Go ahead. Inventory complete, seals intact, 1 photograph, vehicle tracks southwest to northeast, 0500 inspection. Acknowledged. Did you see the vehicle? No, dispatch. Good. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove back to town and slept. On the third night, the knocking started. I'd finished the perimeter walk at 0200 and was sitting at the desk when I heard it. 3 slow knocks on the front door. Evenly spaced, polite, the way you'd knock if you were expected. I looked at my watch. 0214. I didn't move. The knocking came again. Same rhythm. I stayed in the chair. Daniel. A woman's voice muffled by the door. Daniel, I need help. I didn't recognize the voice. I kept my hands flat on the desk and watched the second hand on my watch. The knocking came a third time. Please, my car broke down. I just need to use the radio. The second hand swept past 15, 30, 45. The knocking stopped. I sat there until 0300, then made coffee and waited for the perimeter walk at 0400. In the morning, I found no footprints near the front door, no tire tracks, nothing. I didn't mention it in my morning report. On the fourth night, I started keeping a separate log just for myself. I used the back pages of my uncle's incident book. I wrote down everything: inventory counts, exact times, the sound of the engine, the knocking, the woman's voice. I wrote down the temperature of the door seals, always warm, never hot, never cold. I wrote down the fence post count every night, always 17. On the 7th night, Senior Officer Begay called on Channel 6 at 1900 hours. Officer Chi, you're doing well. Keep it up. Thank you, sir. Have you read the list every night? Yes, sir. Good. There's an addendum in the filing cabinet, second drawer, red folder. Read it tonight before 2200. The transmission ended. I found the folder. Inside was a single sheet typed on the same dot matrix printer, laminated like the original list. 6 new items. Addendum to standing orders. Effective immediately 13. If the fence post count changes to 16 or 18, do not draw the curtain. Sit at the desk and count aloud until the number returns to 17. Do not stop counting. Do not look away from the window. 14. If you hear your name spoken by someone you know, verify the voice by asking a question only that person would answer correctly. If the answer is wrong or if there is no answer, do not respond further. 15. The footsteps that circle the structure will complete the circuit in 4 minutes and 30 seconds. If they take longer or shorter, the seals may be weakening. Apply salt to all thresholds and repeat the perimeter walk until the count is correct. 16. If dispatcher asks for your location during the 2200 radio check, answer, Substation 7. If she asks where you are physically, end transmission immediately and do not respond for 2 hours. 17. Do not enter the storage room between 2300 hours and 0500 hours. If the door to the storage room is open during this window, close it from the hallway. Do not look inside. 18. If you see lights in the distance that do not move, count them. If there are 3 lights in a triangle formation, turn off all interior lights and do not look outside until the lights are gone. Do not use the radio during this time. I read it twice, then put it back in the red folder and filed it where I'd found it. At 2200 hours, dispatch called for the radio check. She said Substation 7 status, and I replied, Substation 7 green. She said goodnight and used my last name. I checked the date on my watch. August 21st, correct. At 2300 I counted the posts. 17. I watched until 23:15. No movement. I pulled the curtain. At midnight I heard the engine again. I turned off the lights and went to the holding cell. The engine passed, faded. I counted to 300. When I came out, I checked the storage room door. It was closed. I didn't open it. At 0200, I started the perimeter walk and heard the footsteps. They were outside, moving clockwise around the substation, matching my own pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started again. They started again. I kept walking, counting my steps. 49. The footsteps completed their circle and faded toward the fence line. I sat at the desk for 10 minutes, then checked my watch. I'd started the walk at 0200 exactly. The footsteps had faded at 02:04:30, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. I wrote it down in my private log. On the 9th night, I counted 18 posts. I was sitting at the desk at 2300, looking through the window, and I counted them twice to be sure. 18. I started counting aloud. 1, 2, 3, 4. I kept my eyes on the fence line and kept counting. My voice sounded flat in the small room. 14, 15, 16, 17. I took a breath and started again. 1, 2, 3. I counted for 6 minutes before the number changed. I got to 17 and stopped, counted again silently. 17. I stopped counting aloud and sat back in the chair. At 23:15, I pulled the curtain. At 0500, I inspected the fence line on foot. I walked out to the posts with a flashlight and checked each one. They were solid, set deep, no signs of recent disturbance. 17 posts, 60 yards from the substation, spaced 8 to 10 feet apart. I photographed the fence line and filed it with the morning report. "Did the count change last night?" Dispatch asked. "Yes, return to correct number after counting aloud." "Good, that's correct procedure." "Good morning, Officer Chi." I drove back to town and called my sister from the truck. "You sound tired," she said. "I'm fine, just adjusting." Uncle Tom sounded tired too toward the end. "I'm following the rules," I said. "He didn't." She was quiet for a moment. "You're sure you want to keep doing this?" "I need the money. You need the money." "I can take a semester off." "No," I said. "I'm fine. It's just a patrol job." "Okay," she said, but she didn't sound convinced. I slept badly that day. I kept waking up and checking my watch, making sure I hadn't slept through 1700 hours. At 1500, I gave up and drove out to the substation early. I sat in the truck at the cattle guard and watched the building until 1700 exactly. Then drove up and went inside. Locked the door, confirmed 3 times. Inventory, seals. At 1900, I made coffee and read my uncle's log again. He'd noted the fence post count changing 3 times in his 10th month. Each time he'd counted aloud and the number had corrected. Then on June 8th, he'd written, "Count changed to 19, counted aloud for 30 minutes. Number did not correct. Drew curtain at 23:20. The next entry was June 9th, the last entry. Inventory complete. Seals intact, no activity, nothing after that. At 2200, dispatch called for the radio check. I gave my status. She asked, "Officer Chi, what is your current location?" I looked at the radio. "Substation 7. Acknowledged. Good night, Officer Chi." I set the handset down and waited. She'd asked for my location, not where I was physically. That was within normal procedure. I checked the date on my watch anyway. August 23rd. Correct. At 2300, I counted the posts. 17. At midnight, I heard the engine, turned off the lights, went to the holding cell, counted to 300. At 0200, I did the perimeter walk. The footsteps matched me again. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. I sat at the desk for 10 minutes. At 0300, I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks on the back door. I checked my watch. 0307. "Daniel." My sister's voice. I stood up and walked to the back door. Put my hand on the frame, not the knob. The seal was warm. "Daniel, please, I need to talk to you." I stepped back from the door. "What year did we drive to Canyon de Chelly?" I said. Silence. "What year?" I said again. 2012, my sister's voice said. "Wrong. We'd gone in 2014. I walked back to the desk and sat down. The knocking didn't come again. In the morning, I found a handprint on the outside of the back door right at handle height. The print was too large, the fingers too long. I photographed it. Substation 7, morning report. Go ahead. Inventory complete. Seals intact. One photograph, handprint on back door. Did you open the door? No. Dispatch. Good. Good morning, Officer Chi. I started to notice the pattern around the second week. The engine always came from the southwest between midnight and 0300. The knocking always happened between 0200 and 0500, usually on the front or back door, never the side doors. The footsteps always matched my perimeter walk at 0200 and 0400. The fence post count changed every third or fourth night, but always corrected when I counted aloud. I started timing everything. I wrote down the exact second the engine sound peaked, the exact duration of the knocking, the exact interval between footsteps. I compared my notes to my uncle's log. His patterns had been similar but not identical. His engine sounds had come from the northwest. His knocking had been irregular. His footsteps had taken 5 minutes, not 4:30. On August 27th, I found the second log. It was in the filing cabinet, third drawer, under a stack of blank incident forms. A spiral notebook with a blue cover, the pages filled with tight handwriting I didn't recognize. The first entry was dated November 5th, year before last. The last entry was March 22nd last year. Officer Maria Sosi. She'd worked the substation before my uncle. I read her log during the day, sitting in my rental house with the curtains open and the TV on for noise. She'd been methodical, precise. She'd timed everything the way I was timing everything. She'd noted the patterns, the variations. On February 10th, she'd written, "The rules work because they create boundaries. The boundaries aren't physical, they're procedural. As long as I follow the procedures exactly, the boundaries hold. When procedures are broken, the boundaries weaken. When boundaries weaken, things get closer." On March 18th, found Officer Herrera's notes in the storage room. He worked this post 6 years ago. His patterns were different from mine. Engine from the east, knocking on the side door. Footsteps took 6 minutes. But the fence posts were always 17. That's the constant. That's the center. On March 22nd, I'm putting in for transfer. This is my last night. I've followed every rule perfectly for 19 weeks. I've had no incidents, no breaches, no mistakes, but I can feel it adjusting to me, learning my patterns. The footsteps now take exactly 4 minutes 30 seconds, which is how long my perimeter walk takes. The knocking now comes at 02:14, which is when I'm always at the desk. It's not random, it's responsive. I don't know what happens if you stay long enough for it to fully map your routine. I don't want to know. The log ended there. I checked the duty roster. Maria Sosi had transferred to Chinley. She was still listed as active. That night, August 27th, I changed my routine. I did the perimeter walk at 0200, but I walked faster, cutting my count to 43 steps. The footsteps outside kept pace. When I finished, they faded after 3 minutes, 40 seconds. I wrote it down. At 0400, I walked slower, stretching my count to 55 steps. The footsteps matched. They faded after 5 minutes, 10 seconds. I sat at the desk and looked at my notes. Maria was right. It was responsive. At 0500, I inspected the perimeter. No tracks, no prints, no disturbances, just the fence posts, 17 in a row, exactly where they'd always been. I filed a clean morning report and drove to town. At 1400 hours, I called Senior Officer Begay from a payphone outside a gas station. He answered on the second ring. "Officer Chi, you're supposed to be sleeping. I need to ask you something." "Go ahead." "How long did Officer Sosi work the substation?" Silence on the line. Then, 19 weeks. She requested transfer. "And Officer Herrera before her?" 11 months. He retired. "And my uncle?" 11 months. You know what happened?" I watched a truck pull into the gas station. A Navajo man in his 50s climbing out to pump diesel. Normal. Daylight, real. What happens if you stay longer than 11 months? I asked. We don't let people stay longer than 11 months, Begay said. We rotate everyone out at 10 months now. Mandatory transfer. Why? Because people who stay longer stop following the rules correctly. My uncle followed the rules for 10 months, and then he didn't. Read your list, Officer Chi. Follow your procedures. Don't improvise. I'll see you at the end of your contract. He hung up. I drove back to the house and tried to sleep. I kept seeing the fence posts. 17. Always 17. The center Maria had written. The constant. At 1700 hours, I drove back to the substation. On September 1st, I found the amendment in the red folder. Someone had added it since I'd last checked. The ink looked fresh. The lamination still smelled like hot plastic. Addendum to standing orders, effective immediately. 19. If you hear radio traffic on Channel 9, do not respond. Channel 9 is not in use. If the voice on Channel 9 uses your name or your call sign, turn off the radio for 30 minutes, then resume normal monitoring on Channel 6. 20. If the perimeter walk count reaches 56 steps or drops below 42 steps, you have walked incorrectly. Return to the front door and begin again. Do not continue the walk with an incorrect count. 21. At 0300 hours, check all 4 door seals a second time. If any seal has changed temperature, do not open that door. Apply salt to the threshold and move to the holding cell until 0500 hours. 22. If you see your vehicle lights turn on when you have not activated them, do not approach the vehicle. Remain inside the substation until dawn. Report the incident during morning check-in. I read the new rules twice, then filed the sheet back in the red folder. That night at 2200 hours, the radio check went normally. At 2300, I counted the posts, 17, and pulled the curtain at 2315. At midnight, the engine came and went. I counted to 300 in the holding cell. At 0200, I started the perimeter walk at my normal pace. 49 steps. The footsteps outside matched me. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. At 0300, I checked the seals. Front door warm, back door warm, side door warm, storage room door cold. I pulled my hand back. The seal was cold like river stone in January. I walked to the kitchen area and found the salt canister, 3/4 full. I poured a line of salt across the storage room threshold, thick and even, then stepped back. The door was closed. I didn't open it. I walked to the holding cell and sat on the bench. At 0500, I came out and checked the storage room door again. The seal was warm. The salt line was undisturbed. I swept it up with a hand broom and put the canister back on the shelf. At 0600, I filed my morning report. 1 seal temperature change, storage room door, addressed with salt per protocol. Did you open the storage room door? Dispatch asked. No. Good. Correct procedure. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove to town and slept until noon, then woke up and couldn't get back to sleep. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table reading Maria Tsosi's log again. On January 26th, she'd written, "The storage room door seal went cold 3 times this week. Each time I applied salt and moved to the holding cell. Each time the seal was warm again by 0500. I don't know what's in the storage room. I inventoried it during daylight once. Cleaning supplies, old flares, a folding table, some road signs. Normal supplies, but I won't open it at night. The rules say not to look inside if the door is open between 2300 and 0500. They don't say what happens if you look. I'm not going to find out. I closed the notebook and called my sister. How's the job? She asked. Fine. Quiet. You sound better, less tired. I'm getting used to the routine. We talked about her classes, her roommate, the weather in Tempe, normal things. When I hung up, I felt better for about 10 minutes, then the feeling faded and I was back to thinking about the storage room. At 1700, I drove to the substation. On September 4th, the fence post count went to 16. I was at the desk at 2300 looking through the window and I counted twice. 16. I started counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. I kept counting. My voice was steady, mechanical. I got to 17 and started over. 1, 2, 3. I counted for 8 minutes. When I got to 17 the 8th time, I stopped and counted silently. 16 posts. Still wrong. I started counting aloud again. 1, 2. At 23:27, the count corrected. 17 posts. I counted twice more to be sure, then pulled the curtain. I wrote down the time in my log. 27 minutes of counting, the longest so far. At 0200, I did the perimeter walk. The footsteps matched me. At 0300, I checked the seals, all warm. At 0400, I did the second perimeter walk and the footsteps matched again. At 0500, I inspected the fence line. 17 posts. I walked the entire line, checking each post. They were solid. The 9th post from the left had a notch in the top that I didn't remember seeing before, but the wood was weathered and old. I couldn't tell if the notch was new or if I just hadn't noticed it. I photographed the notch and filed it with the morning report. Post 9 shows possible damage, notch visible on upper surface. Was the post intact yesterday? Dispatch asked. I don't know. I didn't inspect it yesterday. Inspect all posts every morning from now on. Note any changes. Copy that. Good morning, Officer Chi. I started inspecting the posts every morning. I found 3 more notches over the next week. All on different posts, all weathered like they'd been there for years. I photographed each one. Dispatch acknowledged each report but offered no explanation. On September 9th, I heard the voice on Channel 9. I was sitting at the desk at 2100 hours monitoring Channel 6 when the radio crackled and a voice came through. Substation 7, this is dispatch, channel check. Wrong channel. I looked at the display, Channel 9. I reached for the dial to switch it off, then stopped. The voice continued. Officer Chi, we need you to confirm your position. I turned off the radio. The sudden silence felt too loud. I checked my watch and waited 30 minutes, sitting at the desk with my hands flat on the surface. At 21:30, I turned the radio back on and switched to Channel 6. At 2200, the normal radio check came through. Substation 7, status. Substation 7, green. Acknowledged. Good night, Officer Chi. I didn't mention the Channel 9 transmission. At midnight, I heard the engine. At 0200, the footsteps matched my perimeter walk. At 0300, all the seals were warm. At 0400, the second perimeter walk was correct. At 0500, I inspected the posts. 17 posts. No new damage. But when I walked back to the substation, I found fresh tracks in the soil. Boot prints, size 11 or 12, leading from the southwest fence line to within 10 yards of the front door, then back out again. The prints were deep, evenly spaced, deliberate. I photographed them and filed the report. Substation 7 morning report, boot prints, size 11 to 12, approach from southwest fence line to 10 yards from front door, retreat same direction. Did you see anyone approach? No. Did you hear anything unusual? No. Dispatch. Silence for 3 seconds, then. Increase perimeter inspections to every 2 hours through the night. Start tonight. Copy that. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove to town and went to the tribal police office in Shiprock. Senior Officer Begay was at his desk doing paperwork. He looked up when I came in. You're supposed to be sleeping, Officer Chi. I need to know what happened to my uncle. He set down his pen. I told you he stopped following the list. What does that mean specifically? Begay leaned back in his chair. He went outside during the night, between midnight and 0500. He walked out to the fence line to inspect the posts because he thought he'd seen someone tampering with them. We found his truck at 0600 with the door open and the engine running. His flashlight was on the ground about 30 yards from the fence line. We searched for 3 days, brought in dogs, brought in a helicopter. Found nothing. What do you think happened to him? I think he broke the rules and went outside when he wasn't supposed to. I think something was waiting for him. What kind of something? Begay picked up his pen again. The kind that respects boundaries. You stay inside during the night, follow the procedures, maintain the seals. You're safe. You go outside, you break the pattern, you give it an opening. He started writing again. Go home and sleep, Officer Chi. Do your job correctly and you'll be fine. I left the office and sat in my truck in the parking lot. I thought about calling my sister, but I didn't know what I'd say. I drove back to the rental house and lay on the bed with my boots still on, staring at the ceiling until it was time to go back. At 1700, I was at the substation. The new inspection schedule meant I had to check the perimeter at 1900, 2100, 2300, 0100, 0300, and 0500. 6 times a night. I set timers on my watch. At 1900, I walked the perimeter with a flashlight. 17 posts, no damage, no tracks. I walked back to the substation and locked the door behind me. At 2100, I did it again. Same result. At 2300, I counted the posts from the window first, 17, then went outside to inspect. The moon was half full and the sky was clear enough to see the Milky Way. I walked the fence line with my flashlight, checking each post, looking for prints or disturbances in the soil. Nothing. I walked back to the substation. When I was 15 yards from the front door, I heard the footsteps. They were behind me, matching my pace. I stopped. The footsteps stopped. I started walking again. The footsteps started again. I didn't turn around. I walked to the front door, unlocked it, stepped inside, and locked it behind me. 3 confirmations. I went to the window and pulled the curtain aside. The fence line was empty. I counted the posts. 17. I wrote it down in my log. Footsteps at 2314, outside normal window, responsive to movement. At midnight, the engine came. I followed protocol. Lights off, holding cell, count to 300. At 0100, I checked the perimeter again. I opened the front door and stepped outside. The footsteps started immediately, circling the substation. I stood still and counted. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. When they faded, I walked the fence line. 17 posts, no tracks except my own. At 0200, I did the interior perimeter walk, 49 steps. The footsteps outside matched me through the walls. When I finished, I sat at the desk for 10 minutes. At 0300, I checked the seals, all warm. I went back to the desk and made coffee. At 0400, I did the second interior walk, 49 steps. The footsteps matched again. At 0500, I did the final perimeter check. 17 posts. No new tracks, no disturbances, but when I walked back to the substation, I found something in the dirt near the front door. A key. It was brass, old with a square head and a simple bit. Not one of the 14 keys on my ring. I photographed it from 3 angles, then picked it up. It was warm, like it had been sitting in the sun, even though it was 5 in the morning and the ground was cool. I brought it inside and set it on the desk. At 0600, I filed the morning report. Substation 7 morning report. 1 object found near front door, brass key, unknown origin. Describe the key. I did. Dispatch was quiet for 5 seconds. Do not use the key. Place it in the filing cabinet, top drawer, lock the drawer. Copy that. Good morning, Officer Chi. I put the key in the top drawer of the filing cabinet and locked it with one of my 14 keys. Then I drove to town. I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table and drank coffee and read through Maria Sosi's log again, looking for any mention of keys. On February 3rd, she'd written, "Found a coin near the back door during morning inspection. Old silver dollar, 1896. Dispatch told me to lock it in the filing cabinet." She didn't explain why. I didn't ask. On February 8th, found a folding knife near the fence line. Same instructions, lock it in the filing cabinet. I checked the drawer. There are 11 objects in there now, all different, all old. Coins, keys, buttons, a belt buckle, a pocket watch with no hands, things people would carry, things people would lose. I closed the notebook and went to the bedroom. I tried to sleep but couldn't. At 1500, I gave up and drove back to the substation early. I sat in the truck at the cattle guard and watched the building until 1700 exactly. Lock the door. Confirm 3 times. Inventory. Seals. At 1900, I checked the perimeter, 17 posts. At 2100, same. At 2200, the radio check came through normally. At 2300, I counted the posts from the window, 17. Then went outside. The footsteps started when I was 20 yards from the door. I kept walking. They kept pace behind me. I reached the fence line and checked each post with my flashlight. When I got to the 9th post, I found another notch. This one was fresh. The wood was pale where it had been cut, the edges clean. I ran my finger over it. The cut was precise, deliberate, made with a sharp tool. I photographed it, then checked the other posts. No new damage. The footsteps had stopped when I stopped walking. I turned slowly, shining my flashlight back toward the substation. Nothing. Just empty ground and the scattered creosote bushes and the dark shape of the building against the stars. I walked back. The footsteps didn't start again. Inside, I locked the door and confirmed it 3 times. I wrote down everything in my log, the fresh notch, the footsteps that stopped when I stopped, the silence on the walk back. At midnight, the engine came. Protocol. At 0100, I checked the perimeter. 17 posts, the fresh notch still visible. At 0200, the interior walk, footsteps matching through the walls. At 0300, the seals, all warm. At 0400, I did the second interior walk. As I finished and returned to the front door, I heard knocking. 3 slow knocks on the storage room door. I checked my watch. 04:06. I walked to the storage room and put my hand on the frame. The seal was warm. The knocking came again from inside the room. "Daniel." My uncle's voice. I stepped back from the door. "I need you to open the door, Daniel. I have something to tell you." I walked back to the desk and sat down. The knocking came twice more, then stopped. At 0500, I did the final perimeter check. 17 posts. The 9th post still had the fresh notch. I found no new objects, no new tracks. The sky was starting to lighten in the east. I filed the morning report. Fresh damage to post 9, clean cut made within past 6 hours. Knocking on storage room door at 04:06 did not respond per protocol. "Correct procedure," dispatch said. "Continue inspections every 2 hours." "Copy that." "Good morning, Officer Chi." I drove to town. I parked in front of the rental house but didn't go inside. I sat in the truck with the windows down, listening to the normal sounds of morning. Dogs barking, a truck starting, someone's radio playing Navajo news. Real sounds, daylight sounds. At 0900, I drove to the tribal police office. Begay was there. "Officer Chi, you look like hell. I need to see the filing cabinet, the one at the substation. I need to know what's in the top drawer." "You know what's in the top drawer. Objects found during inspections. We collect them and log them." "How many objects?" He pulled out a binder and flipped through it. "Currently, 43, going back 11 years. What happens to them?" "They stay in the drawer." Why? Because removing them from the site would be incorrect procedure. He closed the binder. Why are you asking? Maria Sosi's log mentioned them. She said there were 11 objects when she was working there. That was last year. Now there are 43. Correct. That's a lot of objects in 1 year. Bigay looked at me for a long moment. Your uncle found 31 objects in his 11 months. He was documenting them, taking photographs, making notes, trying to identify owners. He thought if he could figure out where they came from, he could figure out what was happening out there. Did he? No. He just collected more objects, and then he went outside during the night and didn't come back. Bigay stood up. Go home. Officer Chi. Sleep. Follow your procedures. Don't try to solve the mystery. There is no solving it. There's only following the rules. I left the office and drove back to the rental house. I slept for 3 hours, then woke up from a dream I couldn't remember and couldn't get back to sleep. At 1700, I was at the substation. On September 14th, the fence post count went to 19. I was at the desk at 2300 looking through the window, and I counted 3 times. 19 posts. I started counting aloud. 1, 2, 3. I kept my eyes on the fence line and kept counting. I got to 17 and started over. I counted for 43 minutes. The number didn't correct. At 23:43, I stopped counting aloud and counted silently. 19 posts. I counted again. Still 19. I checked the rules. If the count changes to 16 or 18, count aloud until it returns to 17. It didn't say anything about 19. I pulled the curtain and stepped back from the window. At midnight, I heard the engine. I followed protocol. At 0100, I checked the perimeter. I stood at the front door for 30 seconds before I opened it, then stepped outside with my flashlight. I counted the posts from where I stood. 19. I walked the fence line. There were 2 new posts inserted between the original posts on the western end. They were the same height, the same weathered gray, set at the same depth. But they hadn't been there yesterday, I was sure of it. I photographed them, then walked back to the substation. The footsteps started when I was halfway back. I didn't stop. They followed me to the door. Inside, I locked the door and confirmed it 3 times. I went to the desk and wrote everything down. 19 posts, 2 new posts on the western end, footsteps following me back. At 0200, I did the interior perimeter walk. 49 steps. The footsteps outside didn't match this time. They moved faster, circling the building in 3 minutes, then starting again. 2 circles. Then silence. At 0300, I checked the seals. The front door was warm. The back door was warm. The side door was warm. The storage room door was cold. I got the salt and poured a thick line across the threshold. Then I went to the holding cell and sat on the bench. At 0315, I heard the knocking. It came from the storage room door, steady and rhythmic. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause. Daniel, open the door. My uncle's voice again. I stayed in the cell. The knocking continued for 6 minutes, then stopped. At 0400, I came out and did the second interior walk. 49 steps, no footsteps outside this time. The building was completely silent. At 0500, I went outside. The sky was still dark, no hint of dawn yet. I walked the fence line with my flashlight. 19 posts. I checked each one. The 2 new posts were identical to the old ones. Same wood, same weathering, same depth. I couldn't tell them apart except by position. Near the 13th post, I found another object. A pocket watch, silver with no hands. The case was engraved with initials I couldn't read in the flashlight beam. I photographed it and brought it inside. At 0600, I filed the morning report. Post count changed to 19, 2 new posts on western end. Storage room seal cold at 0300, salt applied per protocol. 1 object found, Silver pocket watch, no hands. Silence on the radio for 10 seconds. Then, Officer Chi, do not go outside between sunset and sunrise until further notice. Conduct all perimeter inspections from the windows only. Acknowledge. Copy that, dispatch. Window inspections only. Place the pocket watch in the filing cabinet and lock it. Senior Officer Bigay will meet you at 0700 at the cattle guard. Wait for him there. Copy that. Good morning, Officer Chi. I locked the pocket watch in the filing cabinet and left the substation at 0630. I drove to the cattle guard and waited. Bigay arrived at 0658. He parked next to my truck and got out. "Show me your log," he said. I handed him my private notebook. He read it in the truck cab with the overhead light on, flipping through pages, stopping occasionally to reread an entry. When he finished, he handed it back. "How many objects have you found?" 6. The key, the watch, and 4 coins before that. Your uncle found 31 in 11 months. You found 6 in 6 weeks. He looked past me toward the substation. It's accelerating. What is? The attention, the response. It adjusts to each person, learns the patterns. Your uncle spent 11 months documenting it, trying to understand it. That gave it time to map him completely. When it was done, it took him. And Maria Tsosi? She followed the rules perfectly for 19 weeks and requested transfer before it could finish mapping her. That's why we rotate now, 10 months maximum. He looked back at me. You're at 6 weeks. You're doing everything correctly. But it's moving faster with you than it did with the others. Why? I don't know. Maybe because you're related to Tom. Maybe because you're looking for answers the way he was. Maybe it just moves faster now. He pulled out a piece of paper and handed it to me. New amendment, effective immediately. I read it. Addendum to standing orders, effective immediately 23. Do not go outside the substation between 2000 hours and 0600 hours under any circumstances. Conduct all perimeter inspections from the west window only. 24. If the fence post count exceeds 17, do not count aloud. Draw the curtain and do not look at the fence line until the following evening. 25. If knocking occurs at any door during the night and uses the voice of someone you know, do not respond. Do not verify the voice. Remain silent until the knocking stops. 26. Objects found during morning inspections must be logged and locked in the filing cabinet immediately. Do not examine them beyond what is necessary for the photograph. Do not attempt to identify owners or origin. 27. If the interior perimeter walk count changes, do not repeat the walk. Return to the desk and remain there until the next scheduled inspection time. Memorize it, Bigay said. I'll file the original at the substation tonight. You're changing the rules because of me. I'm changing the rules because the situation is changing. These amendments will apply to whoever works here next too. He started his truck. Follow them exactly, Officer Chi. You're doing well. Keep doing well. He drove away. I went back to town and slept until 1500 hours. When I woke up, I called my sister. Hey, she said, I was just thinking about you. How are classes? Good. Busy. I'm writing a paper on water rights. She paused. Are you okay? You sound off. I'm fine, just tired. You're always tired now. The hours are strange. I'm adjusting. Uncle Tom said that too. She was quiet for a moment. You can quit, you know. I can figure something else out. Take a semester off, get a job. No. I've got 8 months left on the contract. I can do 8 months. Okay, she said. But she didn't sound convinced. That night I arrived at the substation at 1700 and found the new amendment sheet in the red folder, laminated and filed with the others. I read it twice, then put it back, locked the door, confirmed 3 times. Inventory. Seals. At 2200, the radio check came through. At 2300, I looked through the window and counted the posts. 19. I drew the curtain and stepped back. I didn't count aloud. At midnight, I heard the engine. Protocol. At 0100, I went to the window and lifted the curtain an inch. I couldn't see the fence line clearly in the dark, but I counted the posts by their silhouettes against the sky. 19. I dropped the curtain. At 0200, I did the interior perimeter walk. 49 steps, no footsteps outside, silence. At 0300, I checked the seals, all warm. At 0400, I did the second interior walk. 49 steps, still silent outside. At 0500, I went to the window and looked at the fence line. Dawn was just starting to gray the eastern sky. I counted the posts. 17. I counted again to be sure. 17 posts. The 2 extra posts were gone. I filed the morning report. Post count returned to 17 overnight. No objects found. All seals maintained temperature. Good. Continue window-only inspections. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove to town and slept. The next 2 weeks were quiet. The fence post count stayed at 17. I found no new objects. The footsteps matched my interior perimeter walks at 0200 and 0400 every night, 4 minutes and 30 seconds. The engine came at midnight and left. The knocking came irregularly, sometimes the front door, sometimes the back, sometimes the storage room. I never responded. The voices changed. My uncle, my sister, my mother, who'd been dead for 3 years, a friend from high school. A dispatcher who sounded exactly like the real dispatcher but asked me to confirm my physical location. I stayed silent. At 0300 every night I checked the seals. The storage room door was cold 3 times a week. I applied salt and waited in the holding cell. I stopped sleeping well during the day. I'd lie in bed in the rental house and count fence posts in my head. 17, always 17. I'd hear footsteps in the hallway and know they were just the neighbors, but I'd count them anyway. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. On September 28th, my sister called. "I'm coming up this weekend," she said. "I want to see you." "You don't need to do that. You sound terrible. I haven't seen you since August. I'm coming up. I'm fine. You're not fine. Uncle Tom sounded like you sound right before he disappeared." I didn't know what to say to that. "I'll drive up Saturday morning," she said. "We can get lunch, just lunch. Then I'll drive back, okay?" "Okay." Saturday was October 2nd. I met her at a diner in Shiprock at noon. She looked good, healthy, rested, normal. I probably looked like hell. "You've lost weight," she said. "The night shift kills my appetite. You need to eat." She ordered for both of us, burgers, fries, coffee. When the food came, she watched me eat. "Tell me the truth. Are you okay out there?" "I'm following the procedures. That's all the job is, procedures." "That's not what I asked." I drank my coffee and looked out the window at the parking lot. Normal. Daylight. Real. "Uncle Tom was trying to figure something out," I said. "He was documenting things and making notes, collecting evidence. He thought he could solve it." "Solve what?" "I don't know, but I'm not trying to solve anything. I'm just following the rules. That's the difference." She reached across the table and took my hand. "You don't have to finish the contract. You can quit. We'll figure something else out." 8 months, I said. "I can do 8 months." She squeezed my hand, then let go. "Okay. But if it gets bad, you call me, promise." I promise. We finished lunch and I walked her to her car. She hugged me hard before she got in. "Be safe," she said. "I will." I watched her drive away, then got in my truck and sat there for a long time before I drove back to the rental house. That night at the substation, the fence post count went to 21. I was at the window at 2300 and I counted twice to be sure. 21 posts. I drew the curtain immediately and stepped back. At midnight, the engine came. Protocol. At 0100 I looked through the curtain. I couldn't see well in the dark, but I counted the silhouettes. 21. At 0200 I did the interior perimeter walk. 53 steps. Wrong. I stopped and went back to the front door. Started again. 49 steps. Correct. No footsteps outside. At 0300 I checked the seals. The storage room door was cold. I applied salt and went to the holding cell. At 0330 I heard footsteps inside the substation. They came from the main room, slow and deliberate. I sat on the bench in the holding cell and listened. The footsteps moved from the desk to the window, then back to the desk. They stopped. I heard the desk drawer open. I stood up and looked through the gap in the cell door. I couldn't see anyone. The desk was 20 feet away, and from my angle I could see the top drawer hanging open. But no one was there. The drawer closed. The footsteps started again, moving toward the storage room. They stopped at the storage room door. I heard the doorknob turn. The door didn't open. The footsteps moved away, back toward the desk. Then silence. I stayed in the cell until 0500. When I came out, the desk drawer was closed. The storage room door was closed. The salt line at the storage room threshold was intact. I went to the window and looked at the fence line. Dawn was starting to show. 17 posts. I filed the morning report. Post count changed to 21 at 2300, returned to 17 by 0500. Interior footsteps at 0330, duration 4 minutes, no breach, all seals maintained. Silence for 15 seconds, then. Officer Chi, report to Senior Officer Begay's office at 0900 today. Copy that. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove to Shiprock and parked at the Tribal Police Office at 0855. Begay was waiting. You heard footsteps inside the building? Yes, sir. Did you see anyone? No. Did any doors open? No. The storage room doorknob turned, but the door didn't open. He wrote something in a notebook. How are the seals? I check them every night at 0300. The storage room is cold about 3 times a week. I apply salt per protocol. Good. He closed the notebook. You're at 8 weeks, 2 months. You're doing everything correctly. But the activity is increasing. The post count has changed 4 times in the past 2 weeks. I know. I read your reports. He looked at me. I'm adding another amendment. You'll find it at the substation tonight. What does it say? It tightens the restrictions on the storage room. From now on, you don't check that seal. You don't open that door. You don't go near it between 2000 and 0600. If you hear anything from the storage room, you ignore it. What if the seal fails? It won't fail if you don't touch it. And if it does? He didn't answer that. Go home and sleep, Officer Chi. Follow the new amendment. You'll be fine. I drove back to the rental house and tried to sleep but couldn't. At 1600, I gave up and drove to the substation. The new amendment was in the red folder. Addendum to Standing Order, effective immediately. 28. Do not approach the storage room door between 2000 hours and 0600 hours. Do not check the seal. Do not open the door. If you hear sounds from the storage room, remain at the desk or in the holding cell until the sounds stop. I filed it with the others and started my inventory. That night at 2300, the post count was 17. At midnight, the engine came. At 0200, I did the interior walk, 49 steps, and the footsteps outside matched me. At 0300, I checked 3 seals. Front door warm, back door warm, side door warm. I didn't check the storage room. At 0320, I heard knocking from the storage room. I stayed at the desk. The knocking continued for 8 minutes, then stopped. At 0400, I did the second interior walk. 49 steps. The footsteps outside matched. At 0500, I went to the window and counted the posts. 17. I filed a clean morning report and drove to town. October passed into November. The nights got colder. I started wearing my jacket inside the substation. The patterns continued. Fence posts, 17, occasional count changes that corrected by morning, footsteps matching my perimeter walks. Engine at midnight, knocking at irregular intervals. I found 3 more objects during morning inspections, 2 coins and a belt buckle, and locked them in the filing cabinet without examining them. The voices at the doors became more specific, my sister asking me to let her in because she'd driven up to surprise me, my uncle explaining he'd been found, he was fine, he just needed to talk to me. My mother telling me she needed my help. I stayed silent. On November 8th, the interior perimeter walk changed. I started at the front door at 0200 and walked clockwise. I counted each step. When I returned to the front door, the count was 55. Wrong. I went back to the front door and started again. 55 steps. I did it a third time. 55. The rules said if the count changed, I should return to the desk and remain there. I went to the desk and sat down. The footsteps outside had stopped halfway through my second walk. The building was silent. At 0400, I tried the walk again. 49 steps, correct. I filed it in the morning report. Interior perimeter count changed to 55 at 0200, returned to 49 by 0400. Acknowledged. Continue current protocols. Good morning, Officer Chi. I drove to town and slept badly. I dreamed about walking a hallway that got longer each time I turned around. When I woke up at 1400, I couldn't remember where I was for 10 seconds. On November 12th, I found the photograph. It was during the morning inspection, lying in the dirt 15 yards from the front door. A Polaroid, faded and water-stained. It showed the substation from the southwest, taken at dusk. In the foreground, blurred but visible, was a figure standing with its back to the camera. I photographed the Polaroid with the Nikon, then picked it up. The figure in the photo was wearing a tribal police uniform. I couldn't see the face. I brought it inside and locked it in the filing cabinet. One object found, a Polaroid photograph of substation with unidentified figure in police uniform. Did you recognize the figure? Dispatch asked. No, the face isn't visible. Good. Do not examine the photograph further. Good morning, Officer Chi. That night I sat at the desk thinking about the photograph. My uncle had worn a tribal police uniform. So did I. So had Maria Sosi and Officer Herrera before her, and whoever had worked here before that. At 2200, the radio check came through normally. At 2300, the post count was 17. At midnight, the engine came. At 0200, I started the perimeter walk. 49 steps. The footsteps outside matched me. When I finished, I sat at the desk for 10 minutes. At 02:15, I heard knocking at the front door. 3 slow knocks. Officer Chi. A man's voice I didn't recognize. I need to speak with you, it's important. I stayed in the chair. I worked here before you, I can help you understand what's happening. I checked my watch. 02:17. I left something in the filing cabinet, you need to find it, it explains everything. The knocking stopped. I sat at the desk until 0300, then checked the seals. Front door warm, back door warm, side door warm. At 0400, I did the second perimeter walk. 49 steps. At 0500, I counted the posts from the window. 17. I filed a clean morning report and drove to town. At the rental house, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with Maria Tsosi's log. I read it front to back, then read it again. On March 15th, she'd written, I found Officer Herrera's notes in the storage room during a daylight inspection. He'd left them in a box on the floor under some old tarps. 3 notebooks dated from 6 years ago. He'd documented everything the same way I'm documenting everything. He'd found the same patterns. He'd followed the rules for 11 months, then requested retirement. His last entry said, The rules work because they create a system. The system contains something that doesn't want to be contained. As long as the system is maintained, the containment holds. The moment the system breaks, the containment fails. I don't know what we're containing. I don't want to know. I just want to go home. I closed the notebook and looked at the clock. 1600 hours. I should sleep. I didn't sleep. At 1700, I drove to the substation. On November 19th, the fence post count went to 23. I counted from the window at 2300, 23 posts. I drew the curtain. At midnight, the engine came. At 0100, I lifted the curtain and counted the silhouettes. 23. At 0200, I did the interior walk. 49 steps, no footsteps outside. The silence felt wrong. At 0300, I checked the 3 seals. All warm. At 0345, I heard breaking glass. It came from the west window. I was at the desk and I turned toward the sound. The curtain was still drawn. I stood up and walked to the holding cell. I sat on the bench and waited. At 0400, I heard footsteps in the main room. They moved from the window to the desk, slow and deliberate. They stopped at the desk. I heard papers rustling. Then the footsteps moved to the filing cabinet. I heard the top drawer open. The drawer closed. The footsteps moved back to the window. Then silence. I stayed in the cell until 0500. When I came out, the west window was intact. No broken glass. The curtain was still drawn. The filing cabinet was closed and locked. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back. 17 posts. I filed the morning report. Post count changed to 23 at 2300, returned to 17 by 0500. Sound of breaking glass at 0345, no actual damage. Interior footsteps at 0400, duration 3 minutes, no breach. Officer Chi, report to Senior Officer Begay at 0900. Copy that. I drove to Shiprock. Begay was at his desk. You're at 12 weeks, he said. 3 months. Yes, sir. The activity is increasing, post counts changing more frequently. Interior footsteps, breaking glass that isn't real. He looked at me. How are you holding up? I'm following the rules. That's not what I asked. I thought about lying, then didn't. I'm not sleeping well. I'm hearing things during the day sometimes, footsteps when there's no one there. My sister called yesterday and I almost didn't recognize her voice. That's normal for this assignment. It gets better after you rotate out. He pulled out his notebook. I'm adding 2 more amendments. Emergency protocols. You'll only use them if specific conditions are met. What conditions? If the fence post count exceeds 25. If you see lights inside the substation that you didn't turn on. If the interior perimeter walk count exceeds 60 steps. If you hear your name spoken by someone inside the building when you're alone. He handed me a sheet of paper. Read them. Emergency protocols. Use only if conditions are met. 29. If the fence post count exceeds 25, do not look at the fence line for the remainder of the night. Draw all curtains and remain in the holding cell until 0600 hours. Do not leave the cell for any reason. 30. If you see lights inside the substation that you did not activate, turn off all lights you control and move to the holding cell. Remain there until the unauthorized lights turn off. 31. If the interior perimeter walk count exceeds 60 steps, do not repeat the walk. Move to the holding cell immediately and remain there until the next scheduled perimeter check. 32. If you hear your name spoken by someone inside the building when you are alone, do not respond. Do not search for the source. Move to the holding cell and remain there for 30 minutes. 33. If you must use the holding cell during an emergency, lock the cell door from the inside. There is a key hanging on a hook inside the cell. Use it. Do not unlock the door until the emergency condition is passed or until dawn, whichever comes first. I read them twice. There's a key inside the holding cell. On a hook above the bench, it's always been there. I'd sat in that cell a dozen times and never noticed. What happens if I have to use these protocols? You survive the night and file a detailed report in the morning. Then I'll decide if you continue the assignment or rotate out early. I can finish the contract. Maybe. Let's see how the next few weeks go. He took the paper back. This will be in the red folder tonight. Memorize it. I drove back to town and went to the rental house. I walked into the bedroom and looked at the holding cell key hanging on my key ring. 14 keys. I'd counted them every night for 12 weeks. I'd never thought to check if there was a 15th. At 1700, I was at the substation. I went straight to the holding cell and looked above the bench. A small brass key hung on a hook screwed into the concrete wall. I'd sat 3 feet from it a dozen times and never seen it. I tested the cell door. It locked from the outside with a sliding bolt. But the lock mechanism had an interior keyhole. The brass key fit. I could lock myself inside. I hung the key back on the hook and went to start my inventory. That night, the fence post count was 17. At midnight, the engine came. At 0200, the interior walk was 49 steps, footsteps matching outside. At 0300, the 3 seals were warm. At 0400, the second walk was correct. At 0500, I counted the posts. 17, clean report. November ended. December started cold. The first snow fell on December 4th, just an inch, but it stayed on the ground for 3 days. I watched it from the window at the rental house and tried to remember the last time I'd felt warm. On December 7th, the interior walk count went to 62. I started at the front door at 0200 and walked clockwise, counting each step. When I got back to the front door, I'd counted 62 steps. I stopped immediately and walked to the holding cell. I stepped inside, closed the door, and locked it with the brass key. Then I sat on the bench and waited. At 0230, I heard footsteps in the main room. They moved slowly, deliberately, making a circuit of the space. 49 steps, the correct count. Then they started again. Another 49 steps. They did this 4 times, then stopped. At 0300, I heard the front door seal being tested. I heard a hand pressing against the frame, then moving away. The back door. The side door. Each seal tested in turn. At 0315, the footsteps came to the holding cell. They stopped outside the door. I heard breathing on the other side of the steel, not heavy, just steady, in and out. I stayed silent on the bench. The key was in my hand. The breathing stopped at 0345. The footsteps moved away, back to the main room. At 0400, I heard the desk drawer open and close. Then silence. I stayed in the cell until 0500. When I unlocked the door and came out, the substation looked normal. The desk was undisturbed. The filing cabinet was closed. I went to the window and counted the posts. 17. I filed the morning report. Emergency Protocol 31 activated at 0200. Interior walk count reached 62. Remained in holding cell until 0500. Interior footsteps and breathing outside cell door. No breach. Officer Chi, report to Senior Officer Begay at 0900. At the Tribal Police Office, Begay listened to my account without interrupting. When I finished, he wrote in his notebook for a long time. You did everything correctly, he said finally. That's important. You followed the emergency protocol exactly. What was outside the cell? I don't know. Was it testing the seals? Yes. Has that happened before? Once. Officer Herrera reported it in his 9th month. He used the holding cell and survived the night. Begay closed his notebook. You're at 14 weeks, 3.5 months. I'm recommending we rotate you out at 6 months instead of 10. I can finish the contract, maybe. But the activity is escalating faster than normal. The post counts are changing more frequently. You're using emergency protocols. If it keeps escalating at this rate, 6 months might be too long. I need the full contract pay. You'll get it. We'll classify it as early completion due to unusual circumstances. You'll receive full compensation. He looked at me. Think about it. You don't have to decide now. I drove back to town and sat in the rental house trying to think. 6 months would be March. My sister could finish her spring semester. The loans would get 6 months of payments. It would be enough. But it felt like quitting. That night at the substation, I found another amendment in the red folder. Addendum to Standing Orders. Effective immediately. 34. If the fence post count changes during the night and does not return to 17 by 0500, remain in the holding cell until 0800. File morning report from the cell using the portable radio unit stored on the shelf above the bench. I looked at the holding cell. There was a portable radio on a shelf I'd never noticed, dusty but functional. I tested it. Channel 6 worked. At 2300 I counted the posts. 17. At midnight the engine came. At 0200 I did the interior walk. 49 steps, footsteps matching outside. At 0300 I checked the 3 seals. All warm. At 0400 I did the second walk. 49 steps. At 0500 I went to the window. The sky was still dark, no hint of dawn. I counted the posts. 25. I counted again. 25. I walked to the holding cell, stepped inside, locked the door, and sat on the bench. I set my watch alarm for 0800. At 0530 I heard the front door open. I heard it clearly. The lock turning, the hinges creaking, the door swinging inward. Then footsteps in the main room. They moved to the desk, stopped, then moved to the filing cabinet. I heard the top drawer open. Papers rustled, the drawer closed. The footsteps moved to the west window. They stopped there for a long time. Then they moved to the storage room. I heard the storage room door open. At 0600, the footsteps came to the holding cell. They stopped outside the door. I heard the doorknob turn. It didn't open, the lock held. The doorknob rattled once, then released. "Daniel!" My uncle's voice close, right outside the door. I stayed silent. "I need you to open the door. I found what we were looking for. I can show you." I didn't move. "Please. I've been waiting out here for 6 months. I just want to come inside." The doorknob turned again. The lock held. At 0630, the footsteps moved away. I heard the storage room door close, the front door close, then silence. At 0800, my alarm went off. I unlocked the cell door and stepped out. The front door was closed and locked. I checked, 3 confirmations. The filing cabinet was closed and locked. The storage room door was closed. The west window curtain was drawn. I went to the window and pulled the curtain back. Dawn light was showing in the east. I counted the posts. 17. I used the portable radio to file the morning report. Emergency Protocol 29 activated at 0500, post count reached 25. Remained in holding cell until 0800. Front door opened at 0530, interior footsteps and voice outside cell. No breach. Silence for 20 seconds, then, "Officer Chi, Senior Officer Begay will meet you at the cattle guard at 0900. Wait for him there. Do not return to the substation until he gives clearance." Copy that. I left the substation and drove to the cattle guard. Begay arrived 30 minutes later with 2 other officers I didn't recognize. They drove up to the substation while I waited. They were inside for 45 minutes, then came back. "Everything's secure," Begay said. "All doors locked, all seals intact. We found salt on the storage room threshold, but that's expected. I didn't put salt there last night." "I know." He pulled out his notebook. "You heard the front door open, you heard footsteps, you heard the storage room door open, but when we checked, everything was locked. Yes, sir. That means the boundaries are degrading. Not failed, but degrading. The rules are still working, but they're under more pressure than normal. He closed the notebook. I'm pulling you out. Effective immediately. You'll work day shifts in Shiprock for the rest of your contract period. Full pay, full benefits, same as if you'd completed the night assignment. I can finish the assignment. No, you can't. And I'm not going to lose another officer to this post. He looked past me toward the substation. We'll leave it vacant for 3 months. Let things settle. Then we'll try again with someone new. What about tonight? Tonight it sits empty, tomorrow night too, for 90 days. He looked back at me. You did well, Officer Chi. Better than most. You followed the rules perfectly, that's why you're alive. But perfect isn't enough anymore, not for you, not now. I wanted to argue, but I was too tired. What happens to the things in the filing cabinet? They stay there. We'll inventory them when we reopen the post. And the rules? The rules stay the same. We'll add your amendments to the packet for the next officer. He pulled out a folder. Write up everything you experienced in the next week. Everything. Times, sounds, what you saw, what you heard, what you felt. We'll add it to the documentation. I took the folder. Has anyone ever worked here longer than 11 months? No. Why not? Because 11 months is as long as anyone's lasted while still following the rules. He started his truck. Go home, Officer Chi. Sleep. Report to Shiprock tomorrow at 0800. You're done here. I drove back to town and parked in front of the rental house. I sat in the truck for 20 minutes before I went inside. The house felt too warm, too bright, too normal. I called my sister. Hey, she said. How are you? I'm rotating out day shift from now on. That's great. Are you okay? Yeah, just tired. You sound better, less distant. I'll be better in a few weeks. We talked for a while about normal things, her classes, her roommate, the weather. When I hung up, I felt almost human. I slept for 12 hours and dreamed about fence posts. The next week, I worked day shifts in Shiprock. Domestic calls, traffic stops, paperwork, normal police work. I wrote up my report for Begay, 47 pages, single-spaced, every detail I could remember. He read it in 2 days and filed it in a locked cabinet. Good work, he said. This will help the next officer. When will there be a next officer? March, probably, we'll see. I worked through December and January doing normal shifts. I slept better. I ate better. I stopped hearing footsteps when there was no one there. The fence post count in my head faded from 17 to nothing. On February 5th, I drove out to the substation during my day off. I parked at the cattle guard and walked up to the building. The door was locked. The windows were dark. I walked around the perimeter, 49 steps, and looked at the fence line. 17 posts. I drove back to town and didn't go back. In March, I got a letter from the tribal council. My contract was complete. Full payment deposited. Thank you for your service. There was a checkbox at the bottom. Would you be willing to return to the Shiprock substation for a future assignment? I left it blank. On March 23rd, Senior Officer Begay called me. We have a new officer starting at the substation next week. I'm briefing him on Monday. I thought you might want to know. What's his name? Joseph Nez, 26, 2 years patrol experience, good record. Did you tell him about the rules? I gave him the packet, all the amendments, all the protocols, including yours. Is he going to read them? Yes. He's already read them twice. Begay paused. He asked about your uncle. I told him the same thing I told you. That he stopped following the rules. That's right. We were both quiet for a moment. Then Begay said, You did well out there, Officer Chi. You survived. That counts for something. I just followed the rules. That's all anyone can do. I hung up and sat at my kitchen table looking out the window at normal traffic. Normal people. Normal daylight. On April 1st, I drove to the substation one last time. I parked at the cattle guard and sat in my truck watching the building. At 17:30, I saw another truck pull up. Newer model. Tribal police markings. A young officer got out, carrying a duffel bag and a thermos. He unlocked the front door, went inside, and closed it behind him. I waited 10 minutes, then drove away. That night, I sat in my rental house and thought about Officer Joseph Nez in the substation. I thought about him doing his inventory. 12 keys, 48 hours of battery reserve, 6 road flares, salt canister 3/4 full. I thought about him checking the fence posts at 2300 hours, counting them, 17. I thought about him hearing the engine at midnight, the footsteps at 0200, the knocking at 0300. I thought about him sitting at the desk with his hand on the radio, reading the rules, following the procedures, maintaining the boundaries. I hoped it would be enough. I hoped he would count carefully. I hoped he would last longer than my uncle, longer than me. But I knew the truth. The rules work because they create boundaries. The boundaries hold because we maintain them, but something is always pressing against them, learning them, testing them, and eventually the boundaries change. Not break. Just change. The next officer will follow the rules I followed. They'll add new amendments when the patterns shift. They'll lock new objects in the filing cabinet. They'll count the fence posts and check the seals and walk the perimeter until the count is correct. And when their contract ends, they'll brief the next officer, and the next, and the next, because the desert doesn't forget what's been left behind. It just waits. 17 posts, always 17, the center, the constant, until it isn't. I locked my notes in a desk drawer and tried to sleep. Outside my window, the normal sounds of night continued. Dogs barking, cars passing, the wind against the glass. I counted the sounds until they faded. Then I stopped counting.